I'm recording my homily for the 7th Sunday in Ordinary Time, and a lot of my homilies are leading up to Lent because Lent begins this week, right? So we have Ash Wednesday this week. A couple thoughts I want to just mention as I lead into my homily for this weekend was to keep in mind as we look at Lent, Lent is meant to be a season that's intense, all right? If there's any season that's meant to be kind of like boot camp, this is the season, okay? So please, please, please take it seriously. Don't let it slip by. It's almost like not preparing for everything else that comes in the year where God's going to want you to be disciplined in your spiritual life. He's going to want you to grow. This is like spring. This is when things are meant to come alive, okay? In fact, the word Lent in English comes from the word spring, so it means, new life. All right. So, a couple of thoughts. Number one is, when we look at Lent, let's keep in mind there's two major parts of things that we should be doing. One is sacrificing, okay? And then the other is going and doing the positive things, the acts of charity. So sacrifice is kind of like the negative. It's what I'm going to deprive myself of. And then the opposite is the positive, what am I going to do, okay? So you think of an athlete will deprive themselves of junk, right? So think of an athlete's not going to eat junk food, they're going to watch their diet, they're going to fast sometimes in order to become a better athlete. But then they're also going to do positive things, they're going to exercise and stretch every day, and then they're going to compete, right? That's the whole purpose of it. So you think of us as spiritual athletes, there's things we're going to deprive ourselves of, definitely things that are bad for us, right? But also things that are just not helpful. And then we're going to do positive things, spiritual stretching. So you think of reading books on spiritual matters to stretch your mind, and quiet time in prayer stretches your heart. And then we go out into the world and we live it. That's where we compete, if you will, spiritually to bring the gospel to life. Okay. So the two major points, sacrifices, to give up things, and then also to do acts of charity. Sometimes people will say, well, Father, I'm just going to do acts of charity. I'm not going to give up anything. I say, no. We do both, okay? So we do both. All right. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. With the sacrifice, we do it out of love. This is not just us proving how tough we are, right? So that's the difference between us and athletes. Athletes do it to become tougher. This is not us becoming tougher per se. This is us doing acts of love. So when I sacrifice something, I do it for the sake of someone else or something other than myself. So for example, if I know somebody who has cancer and I'm fasting, I'm not eating every Wednesday during Lent. For example, let's just say I was doing that. Somebody who doesn't have faith would be like, well, that doesn't help the person with cancer. But in the spiritual realm, when I do an act of love, it does. It really does. So the love communicates. It's transferred, spiritually speaking. And that's just as real, if not, well, I would say it's more real. It's more real than the cancer itself. It's more real than the food that I'm giving up. That act of love. Love is more real than those things, right? More powerful. So when you give up something, do it for someone else. Intentionally choose to do it for someone else. It could just simply be for world peace. It could be for the souls in purgatory or something more specific. All right? All right. Okay, so then it becomes an act of love. All right, just another thought. If you remember last year, I brought this up a lot. Make sure Lent touches every aspect of your normal daily life. So if you commute, do something on your commute, whether it's listening to some spiritual audiobook or a CD or something like that, or not listening to music, right? There's other things you could do, especially if you struggle with like road rage or you struggle with patience while you're driving. Find something you can do that can help bring a deeper peace into your commute. But do it for Lent, all right? If you're a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad or somebody who's in the home a lot, find things in the home that you can do, okay? And I'll get back to that in a second in getting into the gospel. But find things you can do in the home. I would say definitely give up TV. If TV is an issue for you, give it up, just completely. No TV. Sometimes people say, well, Father, I watch the Catholic channel, EWTN. You say, okay, that's not bad, but give it up for Lent. Give it all up for Lent, right? Make that sacrifice. If Facebook is your thing, or YouTube, or just the internet in general, give it up. Just give up all that stuff, right? Earbuds, listening to music, teenagers, give it up. Okay, so those are all good things to give up. Find things that you can do to relax that connect you with people who are right in front of you, right? Okay, work. People spend most of their time at work, right? 8-10 hours a day at work. Find things you can do at work. And you can find things, if you're creative, you can find things that nobody would ever even know you were doing. So don't worry about people discovering, if you're doing something for Lent. People will never know. You could say, okay, every half hour, I'm going to do an Our Father or something like that. Anything, right? But you find ways to redeem. The example I used at the Spanish Mass, it was so dumb. So, we got a lot of guys who are construction workers. So I said, okay, every time you use a specific tool, you need to say an Our Father. So like you can say, okay, every time I use the drill, I need to say an Our Father. And that just redeems what you're doing. So you're not just doing it for money, right? You're not just doing it for the paycheck, but you begin to bring God into it. And then I said, and you know what? If you really want to be creative, sing the Our Father while you're using the drill, right? Nobody's going to hear you. Okay. So let's get into the gospel a little bit. So the gospel, I love this gospel, I love this gospel, I love this gospel, and I hate this gospel, and I hate it, and I hate it, right? I hate it because it's so challenging. I mean, I love it because it's so perfect. It's so pure, it's so innocent, and yet it's so hard, at least for me. So the gospel is, it's about loving your enemy, right? And Jesus, so we're still on the Sermon on the Mount, we're in Matthew chapter 5, and he's saying, you have heard that it was said, eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, right? But I say to you, if someone strikes you on your right cheek, turn the other one as well. Really? That's hard. I mean, that's really hard. If someone wants to go to law with you over your tunic, hand over your cloak as well. Really? Should anyone press you into service for 1 mile, go for 2 miles. Wow. What is Jesus getting at? What is he getting at? Is he saying, just become the doormat to the world. Just become the victim. You're going to be a victim, right? Domestic violence, just be the victim. Just let them beat you, right? Is that what Jesus is saying? No, he's not saying that, right? But what is he saying? Because it sounds that way. It sounds like anytime somebody does something evil, you just be the victim. It's really hard. So I was selling something on Craigslist, and I've gotten so many scam emails and texts. It's amazing how many people are just out there default trying to scam other people. Some of them are obvious and some are like, woo, that's sneaky, right? But it's really frustrating to just say, yeah, I'm just gonna be their victim. No, right? So in my response, when I want to say something really bad to them, I chastise them a little bit, and then I always finish by saying, God, you remember God loves you. And you shouldn't be doing this to your brothers and sisters, right? Anyways, so what is Jesus saying? Now, is Jesus saying being the doormat or being the victim? No. Is he saying to run away, be the coward? He's not saying that. Is he saying just to just let the whole world go to hell? He's not saying that, right? When he says turn the other cheek, he's saying a couple things. He's saying stand your ground, right? He didn't say lunge forward and punch him. He didn't say step back and run away, try to get away. He's saying stand your ground. What he's also saying in that, he's saying is you choose how you're going to respond in that moment. They don't choose for you. You don't just react to other people who are doing evil. You choose what you're going to do. You choose to act in love. You take control. You choose to turn the other cheek because you're in control of that situation, not them. You're choosing to show a heroic act of love. That's still hard, but I do think that puts it in a different perspective. You stand your ground and you choose to act out of love, right? In domestic violence situations, I will tell people, I will tell the spouse, look, calling 911 sometimes is the greatest act of love. Because what is it you desire? Well, you want to stop the evil, right? But you also want to bring conversion to their heart. And sometimes calling 911 is that act. It takes great courage to do it, right? And you're not acting in violence. You're not retaliating. Okay, well, those are a couple thoughts there. So just to give us a sense of this gospel, responding means taking control of the situation and making sure your decision is based on love and what you want to do, not what the other person wants you to do. So part of it is learning how to not be manipulated, right? But to act in love. I will see sometimes in unhealthy marriage situations where one spouse is very manipulative, right? Because they often don't know how to be anything other than that. That's how they learned that they have to manipulate in order to get what they want, which is not love. But then the other spouse, who may be very, very kind and very gentle and very passive, goes along with it, but eventually they get fed up and it ends up destroying the marriage. And so the person who's being the victim of the manipulation at some point needs to take control out of love, not out of anger and hatred, but out of love for the sake of the marriage, to save it, right? Okay. All right. The other thing I think that's very important if we're going to love our enemy, because this is about loving our enemy. The other thing is to keep in mind that we must be able to see the goodness in every other person. That's really hard also. That takes practice, and it means practicing before we have the enemy. If we wait until we have the enemy, we're toast. We're just going to hate the person. We're just going to be resentful and want revenge, etc., etc. But if we practice beforehand and we condition our heart to see strangers, to see people around us as beautiful children of God, then we will be prepared for the moment when, if you will, they become our enemy, when they do something that hurts us. We will already be conditioned to love them. So I think practicing to see the intrinsic goodness and dignity of the people around us. I really struggle. I struggle with judging the book by its cover. I struggle with judging strangers. I struggle with looking at the superficial portion of their life and not looking deeper. I do that. And you know what that means? It means I struggle with being superficial myself. Whereas the saints, when you read about the saints and you see how they live their lives, they're able to see what is much deeper first. They're able to go deeper. So if they see somebody who's full of tattoos and earrings and maybe they're a gangbanger or whatever, they're just being a bad person, they're able to approach that person and see the beauty that's within them. And I mean really see it, right? That's what the saints do. And so I think Lent is a great time to develop those skills. Now, how do we practice doing that? Because I think that's the other thing. We need to practice it so that we're ready rather than waiting until we have the enemy. We practice with strangers. You know, you meet somebody you know, you see somebody you recognize, and immediately it's like, oh, hey, how's it going, right? With strangers, we don't do that. Strangers, depending on where we live, we can default to a very impersonal level to where we treat them like we treat, I'm in a park right now, how we treat the park bench or a tree. I don't pay any attention to them, to strangers. Whereas we work on that. We say, no, I want my default. If I walk by somebody, I say, hello, good morning, how's it going? And it's not that I need to start a conversation with them, but I default to friendliness. They are worth a greeting. They are worth a hello, right? So to be able to develop some of those skills, for us as introverts, it's a little more challenging than for the extroverts. Now, but what I want to do is be able to go deeper and see that person as beautiful, see that person as a child of God. okay? Rather than being suspicious or worried, or which is really hard with the crazy world we live in. Why does Jesus say, love your enemy? Why does he say these things today? Why does he say, if somebody wants you to walk 1 mile, walk 2 miles, right? So you get home from work and the kitchen's a mess, and your job is to clean the kitchen, but you don't just clean the kitchen, you also go in the living room and clean up the living room as well. Instead of walking 1 mile, you went 2 miles. Well, if you do it out of love for your spouse who's also working hard, or whatever it may be, it's something beautiful, right? So why does Jesus tell us to do these things? I think it's because he wants us to destroy evil in the world. He wants us to literally destroy evil. So you think of a person who has every right to hate somebody, but they choose not to. They choose to love them, and they love them, and they love them, and they love them. And all the way up to the very last day of their life, and they're lying on their deathbed surrounded by their family, and they are choosing to love their enemy. They are destroying evil. Evil is, to use a blunt word, evil is being castrated. It's being sterilized. It's being cut off so that it can't grow, right? Instead of it being a cancer, that person has chosen to end it, to destroy it. If all of us are doing that, then evil loses its power. It begins to go away, and it's replaced by love. I think it's a powerful thing to keep in mind. So this last week at St. Anne's actually is just across on the other side of that, the land over there. It's in the bay just across this bay. So St. Anne's in our mission, we just put the bell back up in the bell tower. It's been out of the bell tower for about 7 years. The tower got structurally unstable, so we went in, had some engineers draw up some drawings, and contractors go in and stiffen it up, make it stronger. So Saturday night, we re-blessed the bell, we rang it for about half an hour, just bothered the whole neighborhood. But it was so great. Now, this bell's a huge bell. Not even 4 grown men could pick it up, I don't think, right? It's a big bell, it's a heavy bell. But this bell has sat in our garage for 7 years. For 7 years, that bell has been silent. Now, you think of your soul as like a bell, like this bell, right? Really big bell. Nobody can destroy your soul. Your soul is going to exist for eternity. And that bell is very hard to destroy. So what they did, it was easier just to keep it. They had no plans of putting it back up in the bell tower, right? But they kept it. But for 7 years, it was silent. That bell wants to ring. That bell wants to call people to Mass, right? It wants everybody to know, hey, we got Mass starting in half an hour, right? And so our soul wants to ring. Our soul wants to proclaim the gospel. It wants to love. It even wants to love our enemy if we allow it to. And when it does, it's like that bell's ringing out over the bay. It's like and it's not drawing attention to us, it's drawing attention to the gospel, to the love. Imagine if every soul was ringing like that. It'd be deafening. It'd be beautiful. Now, I was worried that bell would not sound very good, like it would be one of those harsh sounding bells, that don't sound very pleasant. It sounds actually beautiful. Now, I was told afterwards by our choir director why that is. It has 2 tones in it. And so it gives this very pleasant ring. And it's very loud. And so I think that's like a soul that's alive, as opposed to a soul that's in the garage and not living, not resounding, not ringing, right? So, to have the belief that even your enemies are like this bell and they want to ring out, and we have hope that every single bell, even the ones that are right now in the midst of garbage, right? They're not doing what they should be doing. They're doing evil. at some point, we have the hope that they can get back up in the bell tower, that they can ring one day again. And so we don't give up hope. Maybe it'll be another 7 years, but we don't give up hope, right? Okay, all right. So those were just a couple of thoughts I had. There was some other things I brought up in my homily just about Lent, some practical things. I'm asking my parishioners once again to commit to coming and doing a holy hour in the church, 1 hour a week during Lent, where the family commits to doing that. And so I'm hoping families are on board with that. In your own church, I think that'd be a great thing to do. Just having that quiet time with Jesus so that we can prepare ourselves to love our brothers and sisters, especially when it's challenging, right? All right. I hope you have a wonderful Lent, and I'll see you in a few days. God bless.